Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to share some of my experience of being a permanent deacon of the Archdiocese of Birmingham. I'm just coming up this year to my 10th anniversary of ordination to the diaconate, and I suppose reflecting back on what my vocation is, there are two questions that get asked quite a lot. First of all, is what do we call you? Because people seem a bit confused by that. And the second one is, well, when are you going to be a priest? And I have to explain to people, well, actually, don't call me father because I'm not ordained to the priesthood. You can call me Deacon Mick. If you want to be very formal, it's Reverend Mister, but that's never the case in the parish. And most people in the parish just call me Mick anyway because that's who I am. On that second question, it is a case of explaining to them the difference in the permanent diaconate to the transitory diaconate. So those who are ordained as deacons on the way to being ordained as a priest, and those who are ordained as a deacon permanently for the rest of their life. Father Mark talked about what a priest is and what a priest is called to be. I suppose what a permanent deacon is someone who is called to the life of service. It's from that word diakonos, to the service at table, really. And it goes right back. It's one of the earliest orders within the church. And we know the story of the early days of the church when the numbers were growing and growing, and the apostles couldn't cope with that amount of the work that was being demanded of them. And so they chose 7 men, laid hands on them, and appointed them to be deacons of the church. Of course, the most famous of those was Stephen, who was the first martyr. The deacon, really, in the modern sense, really kind of, I suppose, reappeared as a permanent ministry in the church during the Second Vatican Council, when this was put forward to reinstitute this ministry. And it was said that this could be taken from married men within the church who could be formed and ordained to this ministry. The deacon really is, I suppose, in the parish, almost a focal point of the life of service that all the baptized are called to. And I remember the day I started formation in 2009, when Father Mark was rector still of Oscott, and clearly him saying two things: that to encourage us through prayer, first of all, but through our service in our communities, in our families, in our workplace, to be to develop the diaconal heart. And that heart really is to conform our lives to the icon of Christ the servant. Now, that was through the formation process, Oscar, which is was a 4-year process when I started, is now a 5-year process. One of the things during my formation process that really struck me was at the end of my 3rd year of formation, we had a retreat for those in formation and wives, and it was led by the now Bishop David Oakley of the Northampton Diocese, who was a parish priest at a local parish in Birmingham. And one of the things he said, and his retreat was all based upon the Mandatum's Gospel of Jesus getting down and washing the feet of his disciples. And he told us not to forget this. And at the end, something that kind of was a very demanding statement, but at the same time, a very true statement. He said, don't forget that you're called to be foot washers. Obviously, he's not speaking literally, because if I spent all my time washing people's feet, I wouldn't get anything else done. But really, that kind of metaphor he's using has resonated with me in this, because the diaconate is really a service of ministry, a ministry of service. And that really finds 3 expressions. So there's the ministry of the word. So as deacons, our primary liturgical function at Mass is to proclaim the gospel. And that is a great joy. Still, one of the greatest privileges I find each Sunday or each Mass where I am ministering as deacon is to get to proclaim the gospel, the words of Christ. Part of that ministry is that we are given the authority by the church to preach at Mass. And as Father Mark said, it's one of the great joys that part of our role is to meditate upon scriptures, to read scriptures, to meditate on, to study them, to continue the study, and to break open that word of people on Sunday when we are preaching. There is the ministry of the altar. So we have a specific role at the altar during Mass to help prepare the altar for Mass, to be an ordinary minister of Holy Communion. And again, that is still a great privilege to give the body of Christ to people, especially when that has involved going into people's houses, those who are housebound or sick. And then there's the ministry of charity that we are called to exercise. And that can take many, many forms. I think in my own life, it's really taken two particular forms. One, in terms of parish ministry, has been to be involved in prison ministry, particularly in young offenders institutes local to the area. That's been a challenge in many ways, to go into a situation where people have made some serious mistakes in their life. And the challenge is that we go to bring the love of Christ to them in their situation without judging people, just to go in and to let them know that Christ loves them for who they are, not for what they've done, but for who they are. And some moments of that have been some of the most deeply moving and spiritual moments of my life. To be at Mass with 50 young offenders and just to be with them in that prayer has been quite moving. In terms of how God has drawn me to this, I spent some time in seminary during the 1980s, discerning whether I had a vocation to the diocesan priesthood. And after just under 2 years of discernment, realised that actually I felt that that's not what God was calling me to. So after going to study theology at university in London, and then returning to Birmingham, where I was from, then training to become a teacher, particularly a religious studies teacher, and working for many, many years in Catholic education, in secondary education. So I've been working in Catholic schools since 1993, with a 4-year gap in between where I worked for the Archdiocese. So I chose one group of children for another group of children. I had a role as ongoing formation coordinator for clergy, and I use the term children in the best sense of a different part of the children of God that I was serving. And I've been very, very fortunate that I know some of my brothers work in very demanding jobs in other areas of industry or work. I've been very blessed that the work I have done has naturally fitted in very, very clearly with my ministry as a deacon in the parish. So whether that's been working in Catholic secondary schools, teaching religious studies, or being involved in the Catholic life and mission or collective worship of the school, and my 4 years of working for the Archdiocese, obviously to be involved in that ongoing formation of priests and deacons was a great blessing that the Lord gave me the opportunity to do that. Day to day, I'm very fortunate and blessed that I work in a Catholic school. My day starts, as many of the people here tonight have described, with prayer. As deacons, we are obliged to pray morning and evening prayer, but I know many of us try to pray other parts of the office when we can, when we're able to. I'm fortunate to work in a Catholic school where we have a chapel where the Blessed Sacrament is reserved. So at those moments of the day, if I can catch a few moments, I can be in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament and bring any concerns or any joys, sorrows to the Lord in that moment. We have a weekly mass at school, which we are able to help the formation of our young people, but also our staff through the sacraments that are celebrated in school, but also through having a holy hour each Friday. But also the wide range of outreach work that the school does helps me to exercise that ministry of service, particularly when we have families who are struggling at the moment, as many families are, and we run a food bank at school, which is able for me on a personal level to exercise that ministry of service. There are some challenges, obviously, to ministry, as all of us have said. And I'd say that one of the biggest of that is to make sure that you remember and you make time for prayer, and not just the obligatory prayer of the office or going to Mass, but also that time of prayer to just be silent with the Lord. And those of you who are still working full time, and most deacons are still in full time jobs. For those of you who are or have been recently retired, you'll know that actually when you are doing a full time job, it can be sometimes difficult to fit in those parts of the day to give to the Lord or to give to our parish. And there are many people who do give so generously of their time to do that. So there are some challenges. Working in a secondary school certainly can be challenging when we are trying to bring the joy of the Lord and the love of the Lord to young people who are living in a culture that sometimes doesn't accept that. But having said that, that challenge is also a great joy. And it is a great joy of my life that I'm so glad that 15 years ago, again, like other people, I didn't hear a booming voice or, blinding lights telling me, but I did go on a journey that perhaps wasn't quite a Damascus journey or an Emmaus, but it was a journey on a number 11 bus to the area of Kings Heath, which is where I lived in Birmingham, with a Ugandan priest, Father Dan Oriemi, who had been appointed as priest chaplain to a school I was working in at the time. And it was him, after I told him about my life, who first said to me, "Mick, I think God might be calling you to the permanent diaconate." My response at the time was to laugh loudly. I thought, I've done seminary, I've done that, I've done, discerning vocation, that's not for me. About 9 months later, sitting in my parish at the time, which was St. John and Martin's in Birmingham, in Borsall Heath in Birmingham, sat there, and it was just one word in my head, Michael. And I just thought, oh no, come on, leave me alone. But actually, I'm glad that God didn't leave me alone, because whatever the challenges, this has brought me an enormous amount of joy to serve the people of God.